Hi, Beyond listeners. It has been a really heavy last few days here in Los Angeles. We have had almost 150,000 about people evacuated due to horrendous wildfires that have torched through numerous neighborhoods. And it has also torched through these iconic stomping grounds, not for only people who live here in Los Angeles, but these stomping grounds that you guys all visit when you come here to Los Angeles. In addition to continuing to help our fellow Angelinos, my next guest and I are taking a little bit of a breather to gain a bit of normalcy into our day in between the chaos. I am excited to introduce my next guest, Adeela Hussain Johnson. She is the CEO and founding member of one of my favorite luggage brands, Beis Travel. And if you've been living under a rock, my friends, Béis is an on-the-go lifestyle brand delivering high-quality, chic but functional travel essentials at, most importantly, an accessible price point. I mean, I'm brown. I love myself a good deal with good quality. This hits both. Adeela has had a 20-year career in finance, business, brand marketing, and merchandising, ranging from large Fortune 50 companies like Target to pre-revenue startups. On top of all of that, this woman is a badass mama of three. Hi, everyone. You are listening to Beyond, and I'm your host, Dr. Flora. Listen, life is hard. You don't have to do it alone. As a mindset coach, physician, mom, and an infertility warrior, I have mastered techniques to help move you towards contentment and growth. I can't wait to go along with this crazy-ass life journey with you while making sure you feel like your best self. This podcast is meant to have you feel unstuck from your rut and less alone. Let's do this. Adeela, I am so grateful to call you a friend, but I am also grateful that you took the time amid your busy schedule, amid the chaos that's going on here in Los Angeles to be here today. So thank you for joining me here at the Beyond podcast.
I feel so grateful to be in a position to be able to join this podcast, but also just so proud of you and everything you have accomplished with this podcast. And it's truly my pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Before we start on all things you and Béis, I want to share for our listeners that we are both safe. We are both away from the fires. And like you said, grateful to be in the position to help and to do all the things. I wanted to talk about our day yesterday because it was slightly chaotic, but slightly amazing. And we both ended the day, I think, with gratitude and having our cups filled. We were both out gathering and ordering essentials for those who were impacted by the fires. But more impressively, I want all of our listeners to hear about your story because I was chuckling, even though you were doing so much good. And I am sure there's so much gratitude out there for your actions. Tell me about your day yesterday.
So I am a highly partial to solution oriented in action, sometimes beyond, scope of reason, or like I don't always think through every angle of everything, always. This was one of those situations. And in times of this, like I go into like crazy, I need to do something mode.
Yeah.
Went to one of our local churches who, one thing I will say is there's just been a lot of like turmoil, I think, in our country in general. I have gone through moments over the past 6 months of like just questioning humanity to some degree. And yesterday there was such a large degree of affirmation and faith in just humanity and Californians and our community that has come together in a way that is like truly makes you stop. Like really,
I'm
really
getting
makes
emotional.
you stop.
Yes, absolutely. I had the same realization yesterday.
And so we went to this church, all volunteer driven, right? And half of a city block. The church, by the way, is like full from ground to ceiling with stuff. And all of us probably did this. We went into our closets and we emptied out everything we could think of, and like
Yeah,
some things with tags, some things maybe not. You kind of, as a human being, you're like, I want to do everything I can, but it's sometimes really hard to wrap your head around is like the scope of managing the logistics around all this good that comes
mhm,
and community oriented relief efforts. And yesterday was just such a profound reminder of the manpower it takes to execute relief efforts. And like, this is all aside from like the firefighters and the people who are
yeah,
displaced and having to physically move. But we are lucky to be in the one little gray area on the map right now, and our community has like showed up. They
absolutely,
understood the assignment, and
absolutely.
that church was full, like honestly floor to ceiling, but like the entire sidewalk just like filled with bags that people were dropping off, which again is remarkable. But then I remember walking up, and the woman who was running it, she just looked so overwhelmed, and she's like, I don't have anywhere to put anything. And I said, what do you need? And she said, we just like, will you put it in your car and just drive it to Pasadena? And I'm like, oh, my car's not very big. That's not going to do much. Like, what is another, And so I was like, what if we got U-Hauls? And, there's somebody I work with, her name is Liz Money, and she is like my ride or die, right? Like, right hand helped me build this company from the ground up. Of course, I call her. I'm like, they need drivers and U-Haul. She's like, on it. And I'm talking like within an hour and a half, she was from Venice, and she was in an area that was like on watch at one
Yeah,
point
yeah.
in Hermosa with a U-Haul. I had gotten another U-Haul, and we were like packing up U-Hauls. And
Can
again,
can I
like,
can I pause and remind everyone that you or Liz, neither of you have driven U-Hauls before, correct?
I think she has.
Okay.
She is
Okay, but
like, I
Adeela, you
don't
haven't. You have
know.
not.
I'm not. I was like, okay, so just like I show up and like give you my license and I could like drive like a
Good.
truck.
That yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's actually exactly how it is. But that's really what they needed. It was just so humbling, and again, a reminder of like the force that it takes to get relief. And
Yeah,
just, I'm very, very lucky to not be immediately impacted. And I think all of us feel this is like, what can we do? And it's truly not like grandiose efforts, or maybe not me. It's like these small little, like, just
right.
help me get this from here to here, or
Yeah.
sorting. Like a lot of these
Sorting,
places just need
absolutely. Yeah.
help
I think we
sorting.
forget, sometimes to check in with what the other needs are.
But again, it just reminds you, one, like how many people are impacted, by two, like, and this is true for this disaster right now, but this is true just of people who help with like homelessness, and just like every
Mhm.
day. It's really quite an engine that is required to help provide help. And
Yeah,
it was a very humbling day, and much less about like how did we help, and more just like there's just so much need. And
absolutely.
every little bit, I think, helps for sure.
Absolutely. Right. There was a great reminder that one of my friends had told me yesterday. She had said, make sure you take a break for yourself because, you're with patients, you're with, you're trying to figure out what to do for those in
Totally.
need. You're on social media. We're all trying to spread the word because word of mouth, I think, more
Yeah,
so now than ever has proven to literally
totally.
spread like wildfire and no pun
Yeah.
intended. But I
Yeah.
mean, the word of mouth spread within minutes of,
Yeah.
where we need what help. But it was important to also recognize to, take this break. And I remember texting you yesterday. I'm like, look, girl, if today was a lot, we can always
Yeah.
reschedule, the recording. But I'm glad we moved forward with this
Yeah,
because I think we
totally.
do need to step back. And even if it's just helping one family, one friend,
Totally.
right, is still so
Totally.
impactful. And we don't need to guilt ourselves into
And
also
there is that.
working down the bone.
There is totally that. And I'm sure you had this experience yesterday, but at like 4 p.m., I was like pulling into the U-Haul place, and we got that evacuation notice.
Yes.
And
Oh
my
my,
kids were
which
at
was
math,
false, by the way, everybody. I
which
don't
was
know who.
false.
I know they're stressed out, whoever the signal people are, but man, that
Oh
was
my God, that was
my
a
heart
rough
dropped.
one, right? Because my husband was home, my kids were like at CDC. We were separated, and that there was 10 minutes, right, where I we turned around, I started driving home, told the nanny to go get the kid. Like there was this like
Yeah.
immediate call to action.
Yeah.
And in that 10 minutes, I promise you, like, I can't even imagine what those who had to like follow through with that, because the immediate sense of like, holy shit, it's happening, right? Like, and you just, the things that go through your mind, right? I was literally like, get the pet, get the food, like, and you just go through, like, clear,
Yeah.
like, get the docs. And I just, it was also very humbling in that moment to realize, like, 10 minutes later, we got the disregard and I could go on with the day. And for so many others, that was like a life-changing moment,
Absolutely.
and it added a sense of empathy for me also, that like, okay, like, whoa, like this is like, that was a lot and that wasn't even real. And like, I truly can't fathom. I truly
Yeah,
can't.
absolutely. I think when the adrenaline calms down for those affected, it's going to be another wave of
Yeah.
grief and sense of loss. And for those who are listening who are not in Los Angeles, please continue to keep the victims in mind for months, years to come. This is
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
end game. And it is important to recognize that loss is loss, regardless of
Yeah.
affluence, regardless of celebrity status, regardless of, there
Yeah.
are
That's
different
such a good
levels of
point.
hardship. And it's important to continue to empathize and just see things at face value. You know what? We can explain a lot of things, we can compare till we
Yeah.
all die. But in the current situation in reality, there are people who are grieving for a lot. I'm
Totally.
grieving and I wasn't
Totally.
directly affected. And so I can
Totally.
imagine what everyone's going through. So just keep Los Angeles in your prayers and
Yeah.
continue to look out for ways to support and donate. And I'll be continuing to post things on my Instagram for months to come. Keep Los Angeles in your prayers.
Yeah.
Keep a
Absolutely.
lookout for ongoing donations for anyone that's listening who wants to help. And we will finally move forward away from
We
the
will.
fires. All right, Adeela, I love Shay Mitchell. I know you're not Shay, but
I'm
long
not nowhere near.
love, been a longtime
Oh, I
fan.
love it.
Shay Mitchell, for those who don't know, is an actress, but she gained a lot of, I believe, YouTube sensation followers for
Yeah.
her travel, and
Yep.
she is like the visionary behind Beis Travel. And what is
Yep.
one behind the scenes, I guess, insight
It's like,
about working with someone in the public eye that most people probably wouldn't
yeah.
expect?
To be honest, she is as human as it comes. Like, it is, she's become a close friend of mine, and she's like a human,
She's
and then I
human,
think
yeah.
you
Surprise.
honestly, that sounds really like rudimentary, but you forget that, and to be honest, I constantly forget that she is like famous. I am reminded if I ever go out in public with her, because I'm like, oh yeah, this is like what she has to deal with. But other than that, she's a human. And like, this is her, she always says this is her baby, like literally was her first child. Like, we
Yeah.
found a base before her first child was born. And, we did build this thing together and from scratch. Like, it was truly an idea that like nourished in a conference room that became, base. I was like one employee, and at the time I wasn't even like fully dedicated to the brand because I worked for an incubator, and then obviously very soon after moved over. But we have a lot of moments where we're like, pinch us. Like, is this real? Like, is this
Seriously,
like,
you
did this
guys, I
happen?
mean,
Like,
Base has such foundational values. You can
yeah.
tell the way you guys market, the way I mean, I own all of our luggage is Base, by
I
the way.
love it.
So, and this is not sponsored, you guys, but
And I didn't, that was before me.
yes,
Before we
I
knew each
actually met
other.
Adila after I bought my entire
Yeah.
Base collection. But I am such a big believer in brands that have a true foundation of value and
Yeah.
who are backed by people who mirror that. So it's really amazing to hear that, the public figure of the company, the founder,
Yeah.
and the visionary is just as down to earth as us. You know, that
I
like
mean,
like that Us Weekly little page that says like
oh yeah.
celebrities are just like us.
So,
That's what it's reminding
like,
me of.
and it's so true. And I haven't worked one on one like this with any other celebrity per se. I've had like some relationships with people we've worked with through the brand, but she's not just a face. Like, she is in it. Like, zipper pullers, she's picking them. Like, when there's an Instagram post that's concerning, like, I'm getting a screenshot. Like, have we addressed
Mhm.
this? Right? Like, this is her brand as much as
Yeah.
it is everybody in our communities, and it's so near and dear to her. And I think it is truly like a huge point of differentiation for our brand because it helps
Mhm.
personify the brand. And, she's just such a likable and like affable person anyway. and it has just so much charisma and personality. And the brand, in many ways, voice tone has taken that on, and that's kind of become the brand's voice and tone.
You
And
can tell.
it,
Absolutely.
it's cool when, and I think that it's like, words of wisdom. People always ask me like, what advice? And I think when you can personify a brand and somebody has a relationship with a brand like they do our best friend, that's a really, really unique place to be. And we've been really lucky in large part with Shay's support to be able to do that.
I love the way you said that because, again, to humanize something and to
Yeah,
have a story to relate to, whether it's something as mundane as like, the weekender bag and traveling with it and getting
totally.
up and traveling for the weekend versus luggage. This was my pain point. My personal pain point here is our luggage, and I'm not going to name it other brands, but our previous collection was heavy, first of all. So
Yep.
half of the weight was just the actual suitcase. And then two
Hmm.
was not flexible enough to close once we actually filled it and stuffed it to the brim. And two, like very small pain points that I actually didn't realize until I started kind of playing around with
Yeah.
different luggage brands. So it's just funny that the brand and the company has
Yeah.
hit these little pain points and these nuances and personified it and made
Yeah.
it like
Yeah.
real people problems.
Totally. We always say, like, one of the biggest compliments I think we can receive as a brand is like, oh my God, that is something I didn't even know I needed. And now I can't live
Yep.
without. Right.
Yep.
Like, to me, that is because that's like understand your consumer so well that you're almost like
Yes.
anticipating what their needs are before they
Yeah.
even know it is a need or a
Mhm.
problem. And then you're solving it before it becomes that issue. And that's kind of
Yeah.
like, that's the greatest. Anytime I hear that, I'm like, that's amazing.
I
Like,
bet.
you've
I
done our
bet.
job.
Well, you touch base on it a little bit, but what is the story behind Base? Like, how did you get involved? How did you and Shay meet? What was the need that you guys were trying to fulfill?
Yeah. So I work for a company called Beach House Group, which is a brand incubator. And so kind of what Beach House Group does and does really well, and they have several brands under their portfolio, is they identify kind of opportunity space. And then now the model now, it wasn't like this when I first started, but the model now is then to either find celebrities, influencers to help support
Mm.
the initiative of the white space or do it on their own, which they've done recently with a newer brand called Noise. So at the time when we did this is back in that now I first met Shay early 2017, it was like we had already identified that the travel space needed kind of a premium, affordable, chic, fashionable kind of,
Yes.
that was a white space opportunity, right? Like how do you provide highly functional, fashionable product in a way that's like doesn't just appeal to the consultant that's on a business trip.
Yes.
Simultaneously to that, so we had, as a business, had already identified because we'd lived in the travel space, we kind of worked in the travel space previously. We had a relationship with one of our founders. She wanted to be an entrepreneur and wanted to start a brand and had on her own, prior to us ever working with her, developed a YouTube
Yeah.
channel called Shaycation.
Yeah. That's how
And
I knew her
yeah,
too.
yeah, and Shaycation was this like beautiful produced kind of
Yeah.
world trip. Like she would go around the world and
Hmm.
you'd see the world through her eyes. And she gained like remarkable following and credibility right in that space. And so it was a very natural evolution when we started to talk about like things that she's really passionate about, areas where like it would make sense because it's really, really important when you're looking for brand creation, and especially when you're working with a celebrity or an influencer, like how do you create something that's authentic that consumers will give credit to that person and it makes sense, right? You should never have to over explain why this person launched this brand
Correct.
in this category. And so it was very natural, and that was kind of the beginning, and it was very like she had already again on her own identified a very similar white space opportunity
Yeah.
that we had. And I remember in that the first meeting where we actually started talking ideas, she had already started like drawing stuff on like literally napkins, and it just came together so naturally. Her and I connected very easily. It was like a very easily connection. And to be honest, I didn't know who she was before. I remember like Googling her in the bathroom before I went into the meeting. And there was this girl who worked at one of the other brands, and she was like, Gen Z. And she was like, who? And she like screeched at the top of her lungs. And I was like, okay, so like obviously I'm supposed to know who this is.
I'm not Gen Z, and I would squeal at the top of my lungs.
Well, to be honest, me not knowing a celebrity's name is like, I don't know anybody's name. Like, I faces, yes. Like, I don't even now. I don't know who anybody is. Everybody's always telling me, like, you know, the person from that show, and that's how I draw connections.
Yeah.
So it's not a shock at all to anybody who knows me that I did not know. I couldn't put a face to the name at that moment. Anyway, so that was kind of the beginning. The white space was very much fashion with function and affordably, right? Like, how do we offer travel is a part of people's life that things are going to get dinged up. Like, we don't want you to spend $1,000 on a roller and then it gets a ding and then like everything stops and it's not, you know, you're like miserable because you spent that money. Like, yes, of course we have to invest some money to make it durable and functional. But at the same time, like, how do we ensure that we're offering people something affordably? The really, really unique, which again wasn't like nobody else had ever done that, but where I think we were a little bit more different. In fact, when we launched the brand, we didn't launch with rollers, and that was very, very intentional and very strategic. We launched in October 2018, and we launched rollers in June of 2019. And the reason we did that was because there's another four-letter brand out there that had started their brand with just rollers, and not to say it was saturated at the time, but there was an opportunity that was a little bit more unique to develop that white space in shoulder bags and in bags that were much more broader in use. You use a roller when you are traveling, likely on a plane. You use a bag every day of your life, right? So you are, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's going to the grocery store. So very early, and I remember in those very early discussions, we had aligned that this brand would be an on-the-go brand and it's not going to be a travel brand. And the reason for that was because there's that many more purchase occasions, there's that much more opportunity to be in people's lives, and there's a lot of problems to solve in travel, but there's problems to solve in everybody's on-the-go journey, right? So how do we create a brand that we can actually start gaining credibility in a space that's more unique to rollers? Then when that was our weekender, which is still our number one selling bag. And then we launched the roller 6 months later to kind of create that foothold in the travel industry specifically. So our position and our intention is to fulfill on-the-go needs across the board and not just specific to travel. But of course, I get that travel occasion knocked, and we definitely have areas we need to innovate there still. But that is our goal. Like, we want to be in people's lives no matter where they're going and at whatever stage, whether it's when you have a baby, when your kids are going to school, all the way up to like, you know, when you're doing that cross global backpacking travel around the world.
Check, check, and check. I think you guys are doing it and have done it. Yeah, that other four-letter brand was the brand that I was very unhappy with. But anyway, besides the competitors here, what is a design element of just any Béis product, all Béis products that you're particularly proud of?
Is versatility. So we look at almost every bag and we're like, what? So if it's a weekender, right? And okay, yes, that can be used on the plane, but can it also be used in the car? How would somebody take it to the gym? And to be honest, it gets harder as you have more products to do this. And as we grow, there's certain products that maybe won't have the same degree of versatility, but that is, for us, one of the design elements that's been really critical is that people can use their bag through multiple stages in their life, and they don't have to worry about like, this bag isn't cute enough for me to take out to dinner. I can take it to work, and then I can also like happily take it to dinner, and I'm not like, oh, like that's a weird, like it could be a purse, right?
Yeah,
like, it could turn
absolutely.
So we really, our designers, our innovation is really focused and centered on like, can this be your anytime bag? And can it be used for, especially the shoulder bags? As we evolve, I will admit that is changing. And it's part of, we're at this very interesting point in the business where it's less about like getting us up and running, but it's scaling. And the business challenges you face when you're scaling a $200+ million brand versus launching a $10 million brand, you know, is very, very different. Now it's almost that we've kind of fulfilled the versatility need, and now we're looking at like, how do we provide specifics, right? Like, if you want a bag for this purpose, like this bag will serve this purpose. So it's really interesting, actually, the evolution of the strategy and how we've had to evolve. And a lot of that, and to me, this is truly where we differentiate, is our community tells us, right? Like, we are very avid and active listeners to our consumers. And if you are listening, you will be told what they want.
Yeah.
You just have to, as a brand, be willing to listen and, more importantly, actually react, right? And build an
Right.
infrastructure that can take the feedback that says, we love that color, bring it back, and us saying, okay, like, let's get moving. Like, people want that color back. Let's find a way to bring it back, right?
Yeah.
And you actually have to build a team, a culture of nimble, kind of really passionate people to be able to respond, because consumers are very, very vocal, ours especially.
Yes, they are.
Um, and they will tell us when a stitch is wrong. They will tell us
Yeah.
when a zipper color is off. They will tell
Yeah.
us when this pocket needed to be in a different place. You just have to be
Hmm.
ready to listen.
I love that. And it sounds like you are working with people who value you, your strengths, and together you guys are conquering this space. What is a challenge that you faced? And it, not even in base, just in general throughout your career as a South Asian woman. I mean, you are such a badass person. Like you are vocal, you are to the point, you have fabulous ideas, and you know you're incredibly accomplished and smart. I can go on about all the
Yeah,
positives, but there's always a, and I get this too as a female physician, a petite female physician walking into a room. There's always that snapshot, that quick piece of judgment that
totally,
as soon as you walk into the room, no matter what your status is, no matter what your title is, there's always that automatic thought process.
totally,
What
totally.
challenges have you faced as a South Asian
Um,
woman in this space?
I think there's kind of two parts of this. One is like my own personal imposter syndrome, right? Like,
Mhm.
which is really real, and it gets harder and harder the bigger this business gets, and the more pressure is like, God, like, how did this actually, did I, like, am I helping do this? Like, wait, like, did I, like, right? There's just that, right? And so there's that, like, you're dealing with. And to be honest, what gets me through that is realizing I have a daughter who I need to raise to be confident. And when I find myself like questioning my capability or impact, I have to be like, well, what would I want my daughter to say? Like, honestly, that is
Yeah, absolutely.
always, like, so often my North Star is like, if Sarah came to me, what would I tell her? Or if
Yeah.
one of my teammates came to me, what would I tell them? And that
Yeah.
will usually help ground me, but that's a very real, and it's always there. To the second piece, kind of the more external factors, it is this element of being taken seriously, right? And like this feeling of having to prove that your opinion is vetted, that
Mhm.
your perspective is valid, that I find myself in rooms with a lot of white men,
Mhm.
and who I will say have not done what I have done, right? And have not actually built a business,
Yep.
any
From
business
scratch, by the
from
way.
scratch, right?
Mhm.
But they'll say something, and others will listen because their
Mhm.
voice carries a weight that mine doesn't, or they will make me question my perspective in a way that I shouldn't, right? And there is this need a little bit to overcompensate, right? Or like to
Mhm.
feel as though you have to work a little harder, you have to work a little longer. And earlier in my career, that did come by the way of just sheer like work or hours,
Yeah.
always available, always picking up the phone. I will be there. You tell me jump, I say how high, right? Because
Yeah.
that to me became the way I proved myself. And I still feel I have elements of that. It's getting better because I'm able to surround myself with more people where I don't have to do that,
Correct.
whether that's my friend base or my people in my like circle that just help
Mhm.
remind me that, like, okay, I don't need to do that, but it is almost natural. It, unfortunately, a little
Mhm.
natural, but what is interesting is where I think it shows up a lot is confidence in my own abilities and the way I push back, right?
Mhm.
And realizing that I don't have to always be on and always be available to be worthy. And I think
Yeah.
becoming a mom necessitated that in large part, but also realizing the type of mom I wanted to be and having the opportunity to build a culture and really ensure that the culture I'm building allows people to be the way I want to be, right? And I have to lead with that. And sometimes I forget, right? Sometimes I send an email at 1 a.m. and then I have to check myself, like, oh, I shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, because maybe that's the only time. And I am a workaholic by nature. It's just my nature. Like, that's
But
just what I
also, I
do.
think that speaks to if you've been listening, I mean, until now, I'm sure every listener knows that this is also your passion. Like, this is your passion
Totally.
project, and you truly believe in the brand, the messaging, and all the behind the scenes
Totally.
stuff. And who doesn't want to work for
Totally.
their tours? And I get it.
And I tell like my kids sometimes, especially during like November, December, where it's like Black Friday and everything's crazy, I get
Mm.
these notes from my kids like, stop working, stop, you
Oh,
know. And it's a very, very difficult time for me because that's important for them to know that I'm always there. But I
yeah.
have to tell my kids often, like, mommy loves what she does.
Yeah.
Like, I love what I do. I love you guys, but I love what I do. And
Yeah.
I love to go to work. I love to get talk to my team. Like this isn't something I don't enjoy doing. And it's really, really important for my kids to know that. It's really important for my team to know that because this is not just work for me. This is part of my life.
Absolutely.
And I don't separate the two. When people say work-life balance, I'm like, what do we mean by that exactly? Right. Because like they are just kind of one and the same. And I
Yeah.
hope everybody has an opportunity to work and love what they work as much as I
Yeah.
do and love the people that they work with as much as I do. Yes, it's hard. And sometimes I'm just like, need like a minute, right? Like, and I'll say, like, even a couple weeks ago before the break, I was there. Like, I was there where I was like, I'm like here. And
Yeah.
the kids' school, 90 million emails and the
Oh
work,
my
and it was
God.
just
Yes.
a lot. But like, I do love what I do. And I love being a mom and I love being a professional, successful woman. I have realized how much I need to rely on people around me to help me create validation, but
Yeah.
also help me realize like I don't always have to do it all. And that's
Yeah.
also okay. And
Yeah. It is.
I'm going to suck and sometimes not be able to be at classroom for painting. And like, I hate that. But like, sometimes that's just going to be it. And I have an open dialogue with my kids. And
Yeah.
sometimes that means I can't go to the volunteer event at my work that I really wanted to because my kid has a recital that I want to be at. And
Right.
it's just there's always compromise. And I think it's just really trying to be centered on what matters to you and the legacy you want to leave, right? And
I love that. Yeah.
what the impact you want to make. And one of the impacts I want to make is to help my team know that they can do both, right? Like you can be
Yeah.
successful and you can have a family and you can do both. Maybe you're a little crazy, but like you could do both.
That's okay. We all have a little crazy in us.
We're
It's
all a
okay.
little
We're all a
crazy.
little crazy. It's all good. That's what makes us tick. So what
Totally.
advice would you give? Say Syra comes up to you, right? In the next, I don't know, 15 years and was
Yeah.
like, Mom, I am a female of color. And hopefully our kids won't have this obstacle being as high as it was for us. I hope
Yeah.
through all the work that we're doing that we can trudge over some of that. But if Syra came up to you and was like, Mom, I want to make it in this field and I'm working so hard. I'm doing all the things, but the guy next to me is like getting credit. I mean, you had mentioned that you were the yes woman for a long time until kind of motherhood changed your perspective and you were forced to kind of put some boundaries up.
Yeah.
But what would you advise someone that, does have the time and space and the bandwidth to do all the things? What would be your advice now? How would you hold boundaries, but also get far
Yeah.
and also make yourself feel heard?
Yeah. My perspective is maybe a bit unconventional, and I'll be honest. Like I I know I was the yes person, but I also know that got me where I was. Would I do it a little differently? Maybe. But here's where I do think there is value. You have to be willing to work. Like you have to be willing to just trudge through the mud because not everything is always easy.
No.
And I imagine if Syra was sitting there, I would say a couple of things. I'd say, like, if it's hard, you're doing it right. Like, the things you really want in life don't come easy, but it needs to be hard in a way that you see progress. And I think
Mhm.
that to me, there was a point in my career where I was busting my ass and I wasn't feeling progress. And that to me is when red flags and progress,
Mhm.
however you define progress. For me, it
Yes.
was movement in my career, a title, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
but maybe progress looks different, but like define what progress looks like. And little, not all, they're not all going to be huge raises and huge title increases, but like
Mhm.
progress might be additional responsibility. Progress might be, you know, a new project, whatever that is.
Mhm.
But like define what that looks like. And as long as you're making strides, sometimes that might require you to move laterally in your career.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might actually require you to take a step back because it puts
Mhm.
you in the right industry. So like
Yeah.
it's not about ease. It's not about, it's
Yeah.
to me, it's progress. And so I tell her to like find what, how you define progress. Like, what does that look like?
Mhm.
And the second piece, and to be honest, I think I've learned this more and more in my career, and it comes more and more handy the broader the scope is of my career, is know your audience and know how to talk to people in a way that they will listen.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, and one of the best pieces of advice I ever got early in my career, which was like a game changer for me, is it was all about, because I was a woman of color and because I felt I had to speak louder, it was always, this is my point of view, listen to me, and da da,
Mhm.
and it was like a bulldozer. Like I
Yes.
felt
Yes.
like I was a bulldozer and I
I've
had
been
to be a
there. I've
bulldozer
been there. Yes.
because if I wasn't, nobody would listen.
No one will listen. Yes.
And I was given advice by one of my female leaders, and it was actually a change point in my career. I was supposed to be getting promoted, and she said, "You're not getting promoted, and here's why. This is the feedback we've received on you.
Mm.
Is that, and you're harsh, you're brash, like you can't get along with people." And I was like, "Wait, me? Like that's just never how
Mhm.
I saw myself." And after the initial shock, and because I trusted her and I knew her feedback was coming from a really really good place, I sat and I was like, well, what could this mean, right? And what it meant was like I wasn't a good listener and I wasn't a good
Mm.
observer. I was really good at getting my point of view across
Mhm.
and like my opinion is right and listen to me. And over time, the evolution is I listen and observe a lot. And what that has allowed me to do is adapt the way I communicate and the message and the points and how I get through the day is
Mhm.
very much based on who is sitting on the other side.
That's so
And
important.
that is the advice to me. Like what I would tell Syra is it's not about in that moment, if you are speaking to somebody because you need to achieve X, Y, and Z, the goal is to achieve X, Y, and Z. You might need to adjust how you speak. It doesn't mean you're changing who you are. And I think that distinction was very important for me in my career because at the point I received this feedback, I went through this emotional roller coaster where I felt like, well, if I'm being asked to change how I present, then I'm being asked to change who I am. And I'm
Mhm.
not willing to do that. And that's not true. And in order to be a good leader and be a good communicator, you have to change the way you show up.
Yeah.
And the way you show up is different based on who you're talking to. And it doesn't mean you are changing and doesn't mean you are assimilating so much that you're losing yourself. You have to have those values and you have to be
Yes.
grounded, but you have to be willing to change and adapt. That is probably one of my greatest strengths. And that comes from life and having moved a lot and living in different places. I'm just
Yeah.
very flexible and adaptable, but it's allowed me to communicate in a room of people that look nothing like me, that are nothing like me, and still be able to get an outcome I need. And I think that is the skill that has helped me do that probably the most successfully.
So many points were hit there. So, a common theme with the younger generations, at least from our perspective,
Yeah,
is that, they want things to come easy to them because they've been in a privileged spot. Our kids are included in that. And it's,
1000%.
I mean, we came from immigrant families, and I think we saw a different work ethic. And even though we are currently, as parents and as entrepreneurs and as employees, we're all busting our asses left and right too. Our kids are still seeing that. However, I love that you pointed out the fact that something is hard doesn't make it wrong. It is
Yeah,
okay to bust your ass left and right, no matter what
yeah,
the field. Like during residency, I don't think I'd ever
totally.
go over that again. But I mean, we were still tired, exhausted, but we were also working crazy hours and learning. Without that foundation, I don't think we'd be able to practice medicine the way we practice right now. So, again, not saying
Totally.
that that is the way to do things, but I think there are times where you do have to it's all like a spectrum, right? Nothing is actually equally balanced when you
No.
talk about motherhood and working. Even if you're not a parent, it's all a
Yeah,
spectrum. At what point am I going to give a little bit more here and a little bit less here? It doesn't mean that you have to be an all or nothing mindset. It doesn't have to be all
totally.
black and white, but if it takes, I don't know, if your timeline is, hey, you know what, in the next 6 months, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to go and I'm going to
Yeah,
sacrifice a couple of things. I'm going to keep the lines of communication open, which is something that you also mentioned,
yeah,
to, let my family know, like, hey, the next 6 months are going to be hard. This is my goal. I'm just going to test this out. I'm going to jump through the hoops. I'm going to be the
yeah,
yes person at work and I'm going to see where this goes. And if there
yeah,
isn't progress, like you said, however you defined it, it's time to just self reflect, pause,
totally.
and figure out what your next move is. So I love that piece of advice and the fact that yes, we are, especially in our society, regardless of generation, age, we are in a society right now with social media, with the keyboard warriors, to say, to
Yeah,
verbalize, to constantly be wanting to be heard instead of sitting back, observing and listening. And this is something that Base does, right? As a
yeah,
brand, you mentioned it, you
yeah,
guys listen to consumers and your customers, but even just day to day, you don't have to
totally.
be a CEO to use this piece of advice that just pause, read the room, maybe
Read
adjust your
the room.
tone, adjust your verbiage, even adjust your stance. I do that when I walk into a patient room. There is a certain posture that I put on
Mm,
to relay a sense of authority and
yeah,
relay a sense of like I'm a expert that you can trust and that we can
yeah,
work together to make a decision about your health, something that's so vulnerable for people.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
it's important to just pause, self reflect, observe, and pivot if needed without foregoing your values and foundation for sure.
totally.
I think that's doable.
I think what I have noticed, and to be honest, it's such an interesting topic because we obviously in 2020 moved, we were not a remote culture before that, and we moved into a remote culture. What I'm finding is one of the most challenging things is that element of like reading a room and knowing how to understand how to read the communication nods
Mhm.
that are not said or typed or written,
Yes.
and how people build like a professional ambiance in a way that it's a presence, right? And that element is really, really hard
Mhm.
virtually. And
Absolutely.
I feel like the generation that's entering the workforce now is at such a tremendous
Oh,
disadvantage.
yeah.
And I
Interesting.
say this coming from somebody who's running a company who is a proponent of remote culture. We are a
Sure.
remote first. So I'm not saying this on the other side of that. It's a struggle we're facing. We're trying to do things differently because I am a mom first, and this means a lot to me, but I need to be able to go to my kids' concerts and I
Yeah.
can't drive to West Hollywood every day. My life has changed, right? COVID
Right.
changed our lives,
Yeah.
and the expectations I have of how I show up for my family are different than they were before. And so I get that, and we lead with that, but that element of people, and I think social media, and I think there's just so much influence in our world today that has taken the humanity out of the way we build relationships, and it affects our communication. It affects the tone, the like
Mhm.
it's just so much is lost, and it really is like trust is such a fundamental part of building
Absolutely.
relationships, not just trust in each other, but the ability to build confidence and trust in yourself. And
Mhm.
it's a difficult world, and I think the question Sarah will come to me with, that she and my sons too will face, will be different because the world they will live in will look different, I think, than
Absolutely.
how we've built our careers and our culture and the relationships in our home. It's going to be really hard. I think harder for them.
It will be harder for them. However, on the flip side, a silver lining is that they have us as parents. We're the kind of like that
Totally.
weird sandwich generation that's gone through these transitions of like a
So
very
true.
fast forward thinking society and innovation that we know the quote unquote old school ways, right? To communicate
Yeah,
and to move forward. But on the flip side, we also know the virtual side and the complications and the
totally.
hardships with that. How so for I know we've referenced your kids, your husband.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids. So I have Noah, who's 9, Syra just turned 8, and Kyrie is 6.5. So they're like 19 and 20 months apart, the two of them, or
I
the
bow
three of them.
down. I bow down.
Um,
That is incredible. And
I,
your husband,
it's
Tim,
and my husband
is,
Tim's in
yes.
healthcare. He's in digital health, also executive level. So, busy household. We both work from home. So our little physical household is very busy. We don't have family locally, which is hard, but we have like the most amazing nanny who helps support us, and
Same.
just a
The
network
village.
of friends, the village, the me
The
calling up somebody, be like,
village.
I cannot get my kid home from school. Can you help me write it? And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, just on that note, I think, as my kids are first generation. I was not born here myself. And so I have a lot of these like immigrant founded cultural beliefs of like what nuclear families look like. And,
Yeah.
I grew up and when there was like 100 people always around, right? So like, it's
Yeah.
just, my parents raised us in such a different world. And there's so much more pressure on parents today, I feel, to like raise the perfect child, because
Absolutely.
we are so much more intuitive to, just
Yes.
because there's just so much more availability of resources. And um,
Yes. And I think we had
I
space to build a little bit of emotional intelligence and,
yes,
thankfully, the privileged space to just pause and be like, okay, what the
yeah,
hell am I doing wrong here? Like, why isn't this working out of frustration?
totally,
And pause, self reflect, do a little bit of meditation,
totally.
all the like woohoo stuff that our parents are like, why are you wasting
What do you
time
do?
on this? I think it's important that we pass that EQ on to
Yeah,
our
yeah,
little baby children who have these big brains and developing minds,
totally.
and they are smarter and smarter every year.
And
And
not
you,
just
you
like
got to learn.
smarter, but like, I mean, my three like now are at the stage where like we're like, oh wait, they're like whispering. Are they about like are they taking over
Oh,
this household? Like, what's it?
yep,
We're outnumbered. Like,
yep.
but I mean, I'm so blessed. I'm so lucky. I have an incredibly supportive husband who is just like, and I wouldn't in fairness, there's no way I would have gotten to this point in my career if I didn't
Yeah,
have that, because it does take a village. He is my village, right? Like
yeah.
and he's like the center of my village.
All hands on
And
deck.
it is, yeah, starting a business and from scratch. We actually even tried to start our own business in the midst of all of that, and it
Oh,
didn't work
wow.
out. And, it's hard and it takes a lot of sacrifice, and not just sacrifice from me, but my whole family had to
Yes.
be willing to sacrifice to get me and my husband, to his career. And
Yeah.
it takes a village. God, it takes a
But I
village.
think by keeping the lines of communication open with our kids, with our partners, with our family, with our nannies, with our village, I think it is
Yeah.
important to bring in that perspective to say, like, look, it's going to be the busy season, right? Holiday season. It's going to be really
Yeah.
busy. This is why, because we are launching, we are making deals, we need marketing with just
Yeah.
different things to deploy during a very short period of time. I
Yeah.
think it's okay to be transparent about that, to help others understand. What is your like, do you guys have a non-negotiable, like, family, or just a non-negotiable for you amid, like, your busy schedule? Is there something that you're
I'll
like,
say
"All
what
right,
mine is
base
now.
staff."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what mine is now. Who knows if this will, because I know
Yeah.
life happens, but like, I will not miss an important event, a birthday. Like, I don't care. I will not go to a conference. I will not, like, no, like the occasions in my kids, especially, and my husband's, but I will be there. And if that means I have to tell you a meeting is to move, like a meeting is to move. And
Yeah.
I don't feel guilt. I used to carry a lot of guilt. I really don't. Like, I have zero problem telling. If it was a board member, I would tell a board member, like, my kid has a recital I need to be at. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be there or
That's
we need to move the
reality.
meeting. That is my reality. That is my non negotiable. I will not, my career is exceptionally important to me. My career does not need to be the only thing my kids think about. So, so
Yeah, of
like,
course. Of course.
they need to be kids and I need to show up. And so that is probably my non-negotiable. And I'm not like, I can't show up at the class for the arts day. Like
Yeah.
that's not what I'm talking about. More like the stuff where like, if they're expecting to look out in an audience and see me, I'm going to be there. And that's kind of what's really important to me. And then the other one is bedtime and dinner time is kind of sacred for me, right? If I'm at work and we have an event, but I always tell my kids know that I won't be home. We say the goodbye before, like there's a whole
Yeah.
thing. They get very
Yeah.
upset at me if I don't do that. But
Yeah.
like, we eat dinner as a family, and that's every night with the exception of the weekends. Weekends, we're a little bit like during the week, we're around the table, we're talking about our days. I'm not on my phone
Yeah.
unless it's like crazy urgent and life is ending. Like, things happen like when our team members were being displaced and we were trying to find them homes.
Yes.
Like, okay, but I'll
Yes.
tell my kids, like, this is what I'm
Of
doing. I'm going to
course.
step away from the table. But the dinner time is really important to me. And I grew up in a house where that was always a big part of how we came together as
Mhm.
a family. And that's important. And I will, with as much power as I can, put my kids to bed. And my husband and I do that together. It's a whole thing. We're in the bed, we say prayer, we do this, we do
Oh,
that, and then we
yeah.
put them to
Yeah.
sleep. And it's a very grounding time for my family. And I think I've always been a huge believer in routine for kids, especially. And it's helped, I think, just my kids always feel safe, and
Yes.
build a home and a culture of like, this is our space. And those are
Yeah.
important to me.
Yeah, quality over quantity is
Yeah.
something as moms, as parents in general, we
Yeah.
really need to take forward because the mom guilt's real. Any type of parent guilt
So
is
real.
real. The other day, Gia asked me, why I wasn't volunteering this today, actually, for like a hands on art project at school. And I'm like, what do you say? You can't, right? And so it's important.
Yeah.
I could have canceled all of this. I could have easily
Yeah.
done all that and be like, you know what? She made me feel guilty. And you're right. I haven't volunteered for a hands-on art project this
Yeah.
year. I'm going to move my schedule, but it's also important to let your kids know that, what your priorities are. Obviously, our kids are our
Yeah.
priority,
Yeah.
but how we prioritize everything in subcategories, everything under
Totally.
that. Keep the lines of communication open. I think
I
she
tell my
understands.
kids in that situation, because I get this probably because now,
Times three.
it's like every week there's something I'm not at. I tell my kids honestly, I'm like, well, mommy has to work and mommy loves working. And that's like,
Yeah.
and that's true. That is true. I have
Yeah.
to work and I love working. And you know what? When you come home, we'll be at the dinner together and I'm going to hear all about that.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And like,
Quality over quantity for sure.
it sucks. Oh, it sucks. Right. Like, especially I am highly envious of and not envious because there's stay at home moms. Like, that to me is not a thing. Like, that is a full time job that I honestly
Absolutely.
don't even know if I could do. So, like, there's no poo pooing that. But am I envious of the time that could be spent with kids? Sure, sometimes. But to be
Yeah.
honest, like, this is my life and I love it. And
Oh,
I don't actually know if I could in fairness, do
I
not think I could do that
agree.
job.
I'm the same way. And I think about this too. I think there is a place for everyone, for every personality, every
Absolutely.
type, every priority. And it is okay to say, look, I need to prioritize work and my family versus I am prioritizing not only my family, but running a household. I mean, there are
Yeah.
so many different levels to this that I'm happy our kids are surrounded by both. They
Yeah.
get to see us, they
Totally.
get to see our wonderful mom friends who are their full-time job is being at home and running the household
Yeah.
and doing all the things that are just as
All the
hard,
things.
just as hard.
Yeah.
And these are people that are also offering us help when we are unable to physically be there. If there's a schedule mishap, if nannies aren't there. I mean,
Totally.
they're all a part of our village and us, them, right? If they need help or if they need a connection or if they need
Totally.
any other form
Totally.
of aid, I think we all beautifully can work together and our kids get to see both. I mean, how
They get
beautiful
to
is
see, yeah.
that?
And I do think we live in the same community and
Yes.
we live in a world where I don't feel like there's a ton of that pressure of like, I don't feel judged. I hope others don't feel judged. Like, I do think there's a beautiful mix of like both types of homes and all
Yeah.
types of
All
homes.
types of homes. Yeah.
And I think that's really amazing. Where I think, I don't know if you feel this way, but like where I probably feel my life gets neglected the most is my friendships, right? Like
Mm.
that's probably been the thing I'm like grappling with, at the start of a new year. I'm like, whoa, what am I going to focus on? It's like, how do I just spend more time with the people outside of like my immediate
Yeah.
world? Because work is exceptionally demanding. My kids are exceptionally demanding in
Of
terms of
course.
time. And I am not great. Like, what I'm not great about is, yep, I'm going to fly there for the weekend and go spend that time with that girlfriend
That's
because
a
the
lot.
immediate moment is like, well, I'm going to miss the soccer game and I'm going to, right? Like, there's this like, and I will 99% of the time pick the soccer game. And I do feel like that is an area I need to work on and get better at and make time because we've lived here for almost 10 years now. And it's really hard to build friendships in a new place
Mhm.
when you have this much going on, and to be able to show up,
Absolutely.
at the times that friends are getting together, right? Because eventually people will just stop
Yeah.
calling you, right? Like when you stop
I
showing up, and
know.
that's
I
hard.
hear
That's
that. I
probably
hear that. I
that's
think
hard.
it's also important to recognize that, again, transparency and lines of communication.
Yeah.
We're so blessed to have so many different lines of communication. Like at one
Yeah.
point, Adila, we were DMing each other over Instagram and texting each other individually, and we were on a
And
different text
go.
thread. Like we were on four different communication methods. And
That's
I
so
think
true.
also like we can
So
utilize
true.
that. And I
Yeah.
also, that resonates with me too. I think 2024 for me was a time where I had to get my shit straight and,
Yeah.
my mental health and my business and everything that required me. I, just was in this laser focused mode. And I realized that there are so many other ways that I can communicate besides me physically being somewhere. And there are
Yeah.
very specific things that I will show up. I got you no matter what.
Yeah.
But, girls' trips, they definitely fell to the wayside last year
Yeah.
for me. And I would love to fly out and take a weekend away from this
I this.
and
Yeah.
take a quick break,
Yeah.
but also recognize and be okay with that that may
Yeah.
not be possible 100% of the time, almost out of time. But what are you doing to
Yeah.
work towards that goal this year? I would love to do a little goal
I
setting session with you.
I know that was actually, I was like, this is like therapy. I have to actually think through this, but I do genuinely feel like I am going to carve out some time and make some time. And
Yeah.
it's again a conversation with the kids, and my husband will be like, go, like two, not even like two thoughts, like absolutely get on
Of
the trip and go.
course.
He's much better. He's much, much better about this. And so I need to take some nods from him, but it's the mom guilt
It's the
that
mom
I
guilt.
struggle with. I really, really struggle with that when I'm making a decision that prioritizes something that's important to me and doesn't influence them outside of work. With work, I feel it less, but the personal side, especially when it takes me away on a weekend, for some reason, that's very hard for me.
Because you're working during the week, right?
But
Weekends are
yeah,
your time to kind of, yeah, I
time.
get it.
So I do think like girls trips are big. I take one a year with my girlfriends, and it's honestly not just my friends, my parents. My parents live in Jersey,
Yeah.
and I don't see them enough. Like I just don't see them enough, and I'm going to make more of an effort to like, okay, I'm just going to fly there for the weekend and come back, and it's not
Yeah.
highly disruptive. I think part of it is I get stuck a little bit in the like, oh my god, but then like, it's so long and I have to do this. It's just like if I can like get a U-Haul in a day and drive around
Girl,
the like
I
I
was going
can
to say,
I
I
can book
was
a trip,
just
right?
going to
Like
use that example. If you could rent a U-Haul and drive it to Skid Row, you got this. You're good.
I can book a trip and go somewhere for 2 days. So I just
Yeah.
need to let go a little bit of that. I know there's no doubt in my mind that people around me will be supportive. So it's me.
Of
I am
course. Yeah.
my own worst enemy when it comes to
Yeah.
that. But that is one of my bigger priorities this year is to just make time for the people that matter to me a
That's
little
gonna
bit
fill
more.
your
And
cup, and
that's gonna, yeah,
you can, even more to give to others like you already
totally,
are. Yeah.
totally.
Adila, this was such a wonderful conversation. I
Agreed.
loved talking to you. We've hit on so many wonderful things.
I
One, base
know.
and the amazing thing it is, how you started, a lot of insight about being a South Asian female entrepreneur and mindset changes and revisions and pivots that you had
Yeah,
to make. Great advice for all of us who are still building and still going through kind of their self growth phases within work and personally, and then how you're
yeah.
somehow balancing the three
If that's the
kids,
right
the
word.
husband, the house, the everything. I mean, again, it doesn't have to be equal, but there's
Yeah,
somewhere on the scale here. So it was a
yeah.
pleasure spending time with you today.
Oh, I loved it. And I mean, I don't need to say this because your audience already knows this, but like you are an inspiration. And
You're
like
so sweet.
I love to see you have a career. And I know we're relatively new friends, but like have a career and do something that you love and balance the family. And I follow you closely and just very grounding. So much appreciate that.
Oh, thank you for the kind words. Beyond listeners, Adeela Hussain Johnson. This was a wonderful, wonderful episode. If you have any feedback, comments, all that, I
Totally.
want to hear it. Adeela wants to hear it. We're going
I
to
do.
post all the information for Beis Travel on the podcast information page.
Oh,
So be
cool.
sure to check it out if you are interested in travel gear. I mean, all of it, not even travel gear, everyday gear.
On the go
Uh,
gear.
on the go gear. That's what I was looking for. All
Cool.
right, Beyond listeners, it was wonderful spending time with you all. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for joining and spending your precious time here with me. As someone who prioritizes her energy, I am so grateful that you chose to spend yours here. To help me help you, please take an extra 30 seconds of your time to rate and review the podcast on your listening platform. For more tips and a behind the scenes look into my life, follow me on Instagram at Dr. Flora Sinha. That's Dr. Flora Sinha. Finally, connecting with you truly fills my cup. So DM me on Instagram, email me at florasinhamd@gmail.com, repost if you love this episode. I love hearing from you. I am so grateful for you and cannot wait to be back for the next episode. Bye.